So yeah, we are live. London session stream. What's happening? GM. So yeah, it's interesting because yeah, when we look at Bitcoin, this setup still valid. Sweeping the previous month high, also this previous day high. At the start of the week, that was a classic unicorn break a block, fair value gap, but through it. And of course the time element being the most important, and this is what this week did. Sorry, that previous week. That was the whole objective of last week, was to sweep that previous month high. That's what it was the previous day high. So you get your high time frame, your low time frame, break a block, fair value gap. Those are the ingredients for a unicorn. And so typically speaking, um, you take your standard deviation from the low to the high, and more often than not, I've seen the 2 to 2.5 standard deviation zone play out, which lines up really nicely with these lows, these relative equal lows, as well as this fair value gap. And of course, if you look lower, smack bang, Yeti open for the full extension. And I wouldn't be surprised if this is the price action we get over the next coming weeks and so on. I mean, this is September here, right? We could easily see Bitcoin make that move. Will it happen? I don't know. Um, Nobody knows. But yeah, when you look at the probabilities, I think this is a pretty decent probability. And here's the thing, right? So if that does happen, this weekly fair value gap will get inverted, having swept this high. Then I would say this low is going to be targeted, and the Yeti Open seems like a logical place. And you know what? Would this be the top? I don't know. Again, nobody knows. But if we are going to get a bullish Q4, you'd expect a bounce at the Yeti Open. Even if this makes a lower high, you're going to bounce on this level. If we do trade down to these levels, and either way, I'm not really interested in Bitcoin any longer for the remainder of the cycle. As I stated before, the risk to reward with Bitcoin it's not worth it anymore, right? So I've taken my chips off the table, I've locked in a lot of profits, and now I'm placing higher risk with smaller nominal amounts of my portfolio on beta plays. Obviously, ETH, I've been vocal about that for long enough, and we'll talk about the others in a moment. But yeah, in terms of Bitcoin, even if it does make a lower high, and this is what I've been talking about, right? It's the bounce. That's where the alt season is going to happen. That's where massive gains are going to be had. And whether that makes it a higher high, if Q4 is super bullish, we could see a higher high, and that'd be great. So I would love to see Bitcoin. It would be nice to see, but I'm indifferent. Yeah, for me, I'd love to see. It would be better for this to hold as a range. It would be obviously frightening for price to trade down here, and you'd get some crazy entries and outs. And that's the thing, when you look at other, we'll get to Ethereum in a moment, but when you get to things like Solana, on the 4 hour here, we're in massive resistance. We've also, after this pump and we swept these highs, which was probably a previous month. Yeah, it's from July. We took those highs out and then we inverted those supports, this bullish fair value gap. There's the inversion there. It's not pretty, but it's there, right? And here we're inside resistance, and also on the 12 hour, same story. You've inverted that, and you're in resistance there. I mean, look, on the daily, you could argue that's inverted this over here, and you're coming from an order block, but I don't trade order blocks, so I can't really speak to that. What I can say is you swept this previous month high, and this seems like a logical point. I mean, I'm really bullish on Solana, just not right now, because I think with an ETF coming, I think they went lower, and I would love to see Ethereum. I would love to see Solana at $100 again. Simply because that sounds like a logical place for institutions to stack. If this is going to be the next institutional bid, the structural bid, right? And if you heard that buzzword, what it means when you see it's a structural bid is that there's there's a structure behind how they accumulate the token, at least from my understanding. Right, so if you look at Tether, for example, right, that's a structural bid with Bitcoin because they have to swap. Well, their reserves are treasuries, which they earn a yield. Those are profits, which are used to buy Bitcoin. And so obviously that creates price stability. With Bitcoin, I mean, you could look at about $5 billion a year if they take. I think they're earning about 25 billion a year annually. Even if they take a few percentage of that to say 5 billion, that's just, that supports the price stability of Bitcoin. Tether, Tether, yeah. I mean, Tether holds like the 18th largest holder of treasuries, and it's quite funny to to read that, or to understand, or to know rather, that Tether are earning money from the U.S. government to buy Bitcoin, which the whole point of Bitcoin, right, is to replace the financial system, to replace debt, which is the US Treasury bills are debt. So it's kind of ironic. But anyway, so my point is really with Solana is that, I think the institutions and the whole treasury company, and that's what I mean by structure, right? Treasury companies sell shares, to raise funds to buy Solana. That's the idea. And so treasury companies, ETFs, etc., I think they want to stack this thing lower. And if that's the case, you could look at this as a bearish range and just to retrace into that, probably with 5 Cs. And yeah, I mean, then I'd look at this entire thing as a huge range. The yearly open is also at the bottom of this range, if I remember correctly. Here's Jan around here. I've got an indicator for that, but we'll go old school, yeah? Yeah, you're sitting basically there-ish. So, yeah, I mean, imagine a situation where it's like this, right? I'd be very bullish on Solana down here. I mean, that's generational in my opinion. The landscape's changed. Bidding, your life savings on a Solana here, not that you should, but if, say, for example, there's a degen that has, like many before and like many to come, that would be a pretty reasonable investment to go all in on an asset like this. If you're a degen, of course. Anybody in their right mind wouldn't take that risk on a crypto asset, no matter what it is. But say you were going in and you wanted to make an argument for it, there'd be a pretty sound arguments, a pretty sound investment thesis going into Solana here versus over here, right? The regulatory landscape has changed completely. Anyway, so my point is that that'll be an amazing place to accumulate Solana. And of course, I think if you get that kind of move on Bitcoin, you best believe you're going to see Solana down at these levels. I don't see why April's low would hold when Bitcoin is going to visit that level as well. Where's April? Yeah, that's April over there, right? So Bitcoin comes down to this level. Smaller assets are more reflexive, and so that could very well be the case. Alternatively, you could just sweep this low and maybe it shows some really good strength. I'm not sure, but I think, yeah, from Solana's perspective, a much higher time frame. Let's just zoom in again. If we lose this level and drop down to these lows, again, you could look at this as another range. And I would probably look to bid around here, depending on what the market conditions are, right? Who knows? We don't know it's always about context, right? You got to look at the greater macro environments, what's going on with the rest of the markets. You can't just look at assets in isolation. So yeah, we'll see how these things play out. I think Solana right now is just, in my points I was trying to talk about, if you look at Solana, this doesn't look bullish to me right now whatsoever. Obviously Bitcoin does not look bullish either, as I've just been discussing. For me, I'd need to see this low get taken out and see what the market does. But you could probably get a bounce here and then a trade into, up here. And if that's the case, right, if we get this kind of price action today, and we're probably going to bounce on this level, right? If we don't, then you can basically, if we just blast through this level and close below, the weekly is probably going to invert, and then you can target these lows quite comfortably. But we should get a bounce, and this kind of price action would then make sense with Ethereum delivering from this level to these highs. So just my model here, right? We got this weekly fair value gap. We got a relative equal highs. We've had this, there's this trendline liquidity here, right? Look at all these swing highs. There. And of course, we've come and swept the previous week lows. We also swept this low yesterday. It's SMT with Bitcoin. So Bitcoin took this low, which is what you'd expect to see. But obviously, Ethereum's got the relative strength. And now we've got this low, high, low, low break. That's a breaker block. There's a fair value gap in there as well. There's an inversion. So technically speaking, at least according to my model, this should actually trade up to these levels. Is it guaranteed? No model is. And that's why I'm really interested in what happens. The fact that we got red folder news today, and the fact that we're dropping down, it is coming into support here. There's a fair value gap here, and I do expect the previous day high to get taken out on Nasdaq as well, because you've traded straight into a one-sided move straight into this previous day low. You got a really nice bounce, and then we've inverted this fair value gap on the 4-hour. And typically with my model, it goes, if there's a previous day low you get taken out, you can expect a previous day high to get taken out. So yeah, it could just crash from these levels, and the reason being is that I see this as a larger market maker model. Let me just point that out to you. That's the analysis that I was doing over the weekend and shared. And the thing is that, these highs, I like these highs being as they are, because later on, when we hit this monthly fair value gap, just thinking for the visual aid, this is where I'm looking for the market to bounce. If we invert that, then hold on to your horses. But I don't think so. We'll get a bounce there. Whether it makes an all-time high again from that is irrelevant, because once you get that bounce, that's where you make money. High-risk assets like Ethereum and alts and so on. We dropped onto this level. That's where I'm expecting Bitcoin to get to, whichever level it's going to get to on this pullback. Whether this is actually a reversal or just a retracement is yet to be seen. But again, my point is that I expect a bounce, and as I've been saying, on that bounce is when you're going to make gang money on alts. So you'll get incredible entries, and you'll get massive, huge reflex from them. It'll be very, very reactionary. So, I was chatting to the team earlier this week. We're talking internally and with Sweetness, and I was just saying it's the timing is what's really interesting, and we're having that conversation over here. And I spoke on the previous stream. I said, look, this could easily make a move down by the end of this week, and this is starting to play out. So I would prefer to see this just move directly, not take out these highs. I'd want to see these highs remained intact and just to trade lower, straight into that monthly fair value gap. We'd then probably set up a low going into September, or the start of September. And that's where we are expecting another low. Then that would make sense if you're looking for a bullish Q4. So this low over here is this low over here, which Bitcoin is closer to, which would make sense, of course. And you've got to ask yourself, if Nasdaq comes to take out this low, where will Bitcoin be? Now, it's an interesting question, because in the past, in recent memory, Bitcoin's actually fared up really well when Nasdaq's been tanking. I think April was this move here was, or April rather was this. You go back and do the research yourself if you want to check that. But I'm pretty sure that there was commentary about the relative strength of Bitcoin. And so yeah, we'll see how this plays out. Again, it's a game of chess, right? You got to put all the pieces of the puzzle together, and see how the dynamics of the market are playing out. But the point being is that I expect a bounce at some point, and if it happens sooner rather than later, and it's got to happen pretty soon, if Ethereum is to deliver to these highs. And if that is the case, if we do get a bounce in these markets before taking out these major lows, and then Ethereum comes to take out these highs and it's a sweep, then you can expect a much bigger pullback from Ethereum, and I expect these markets to melt. That's if Ethereum takes out these highs, doesn't expand above, right? Sweeps these highs, makes this move, sweeps these highs, and NQ hasn't taken out these lows yet, and Bitcoin hasn't taken out whichever lows it's actually targeting, which is most probably these lows at the least, if not the yearly open. But again, this is all speculation. I think right now low-hanging fruits is these lows over here. I'd like to see, for me, from a trading perspective, right? So obviously being an intraday scalper vibe, I'm looking for these lows to be swept today. You can see the market's just chopping, and that's because there's news later on. I'd love to see manipulation lower, sweep out some lows, trades these relative equal highs from previous day high and Asia and London. That's a classic model for me. And if that could be that bounce, right? If we get NASDAQ trading up to these levels, Bitcoin doing the same, right? Maybe we don't even take out that low. If we don't take out that low before Bitcoin pumps up here, that's going to be a really nice short lower. But that could provide the support from the larger market for Ethereum to make this move, which I don't really want to see. I'd much prefer Ethereum just to drop lower and leave more liquidity. The only problem with that is that you then are in risk of losing this level. If this inverts, then you look for yearly open and weekly inversion, which would be a really great entry. So yeah, it's an interesting dynamic at the moment. There's a lot of moving parts. I'm very unclear as to how it's going to play out, and that's what I find interesting. That's why we love what we do as traders, because it's never the same. So yeah, for me, from a beta play perspective, Link is just, again, a really, really interesting thing to watch, especially given the fact that, this week, in the previous video, I spoke about how I'm looking for a retest of this level, and we literally tapped that. There it is, bam. So yeah, I called for 23, we got it. And I'm not concerned with this in any type of price range. We could come and revisit this level. It doesn't make a difference, because I'm looking at this chart on the weekly, and this is a very bullish range that we're in. We could trade down to these lows. It wouldn't make a difference. The fact that we've inverted this fair value gap tells me we're most probably going for these highs at 31. And the best part about a market maker model is that when you've got liquidity stacked, the chances are it's probably going to expand higher. And I mean, the fundamentals in Link right now are probably the best risk reward in crypto. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but even at these levels, it makes sense to accumulate Link. If you're not in position for Link, do your own research and consider where this asset will be in time to come. Because as a long-term hold, in my opinion, I think this is probably the best. This is probably one of those assets you could consider holding long-term and accumulating, simply because it's got a revenue model, and it's reflexive, because when they earn fees or profits, generate revenue from the transactions, etc., from what Chainlink does, which benefits from all other blockchains, they then go and buy back and then put that link supply in reserve, right? It's creating artificial scarcity. And listen, if you're going to bet on the crypto industry, by default, you are betting on Link. So there's just, and you look at the market cap, it's like 17 billion, and it's not even in the top 10. And you look at projects above Link, I can't tell you. I mean, we all know the story of XRP, biggest scam ever, right? The irony also there is that XRP is meant to be, what all the banks use, etc., and Link is doing exactly that. So the future of finance, XRP, I mean, that's what's going to $589, of course, with a market cap of, tens of trillions. Makes complete sense. So, yeah, I mean, my point is with Link, from a fundamental perspective, you look at the projects above it, and do they provide more value than Link? Probably not. And yeah, so Yeah, I think this has really got legs. I mean, for me, it's right now I'm holding stables predominantly Link and Ethereum. I've got a small amount of Solana, which is just so I have a small amount of, and I mean, 1 or 2%. Um, that's more of a psychological thing for me. So yeah, I did a bit of checks as well. So yeah, but for me, Ethereum has been my high conviction bet now since beginning of the year really, um, and I've now shifted into to Link um, as that high conviction kind of trade now. So yeah, guys, that's my view in the markets. Again, just to summarize, it's an interesting time for where Bitcoin's at. It's getting rejected from resistance right now. Uh, we'll see if Bitcoin can come and drop and hit this into news, especially today. I think there's unemployment numbers coming out at 8:30 EST. If we can just trade directly into that into news, I expect then a reversal in New York. This will probably hold up as well. You get a nice reversal here to come take out these highs. And then yeah, maybe we do get a really nice move into this area, and that would give Ethereum the push to come take out these highs, which would be great in the short run. But I wouldn't want to be holding Ethereum at you know after it sweeps the all-time high. Um, I think you'd probably look for it to get rejected, come lower, take a late longers, and then have another stab in Q4. That would make sense. I'd be way more comfortable with this thing just dropping. Yes, my model, this all checks out, but from an investment perspective, I'd much prefer this to fail, build up shorts, and it would actually be a lot simpler. As from a trading perspective, it would be a lot simpler if we just start dropping now into September, because then it would be very clear to get into long positions, because then it's one-sided delivery into sell side, and then whether that's whether this is going to continuation for all-time highs or not is besides the point. You're just playing the bounce, and in my experience, it's the bounce, especially in a downtrend, is where you make some really good money. I've noticed in my scalping that when you're counter trend trading, it's usually a very clean one-sided delivery. In case in points, is yesterday's trade. Um, I mean, my model obviously has been. I spoke about this market maker sell model. Missed the SMT, the sweep of the highs, the London highs with ES. Just was too slow on the trigger. I mean, at the open, it just dumped. Hard to catch. But I sat patiently waiting. We hit that previous day low, and this was my trade. I mean, that's the type of shit you want to be in, where there's just that one-sided delivery. And so, yeah, and this is my point. If you catch the bounce as when the market's selling off, these are the type of stuff that you get. Because you just had one-sided delivery, and now it needs to be efficient, and so you get the same on the other side. So yeah, we'll see how it plays out. It's interesting times, and yeah, we'll see how it works out from here.